Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Find my book. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Sarasatim Vyasam. Tato Jayam Udiraye. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 33, Activities of Kapila, and it's text number 6. The translation is, to say nothing of the spiritual advancement of persons who see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Even a person born in a family of dog-eaters immediately becomes eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices if he once utters the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or chants about him, hears about his pastimes, offers him obeisances, or even remembers him. Purport. Herein the spiritual potency of chanting, hearing, or remembering the holy name of the Supreme Lord is greatly stressed. Rupa Goswami has discussed the sequence of sinful activities of the conditioned soul, and he has established in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that those who engage in devotional service become freed from the reactions of all sinful activities. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The Lord says that he takes charge of one who surrenders unto him, and he makes him immune to all reactions to sinful activities. If by chanting the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead one becomes so swiftly cleared of all reactions to sinful activities, then what is to be said of those persons who see him face to face? Another consideration here is that persons who are purified by the process of chanting and hearing become immediately eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices. Generally, only a person who is born in a family of Brahmanas, who has been reformed by the 10 kinds of purificatory processes, and who is learned in Vedic literatures, is allowed to perform the Vedic sacrifices. But here the word sadhya, immediately, is used, and Sridhar Swami also remarks that one can immediately become eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices. A person born in a family of the low caste, which is accustomed to eat dogs, is so positioned due to his past sinful activities. But by chanting or hearing once in pureness, or in an offenseless manner, he is immediately relieved of the sinful reactions. Not only is he relieved of the sinful reactions, but he immediately achieves the result of all purificatory processes. Taking birth in the family of a Brahmana is certainly due to pious activities in one's past life. But still a child who is born in a family of a Brahmana depends on his further reformation upon initiation into acceptance of a sacred thread and many other reformatory processes. But a person who chants the holy name of the Lord, even if born in a family of chandalas, dog-eaters, does not need reformation. Simply by chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa, he immediately becomes purified and becomes as good as the most learned Brahmana. Sridhar Swami especially remarks in this connection, Anena Pujatvam Lakshite. Some caste brahmanas remark that by chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa, purification begins. Of course, that depends on the individual process of chanting, but this remark of Sridhar Swami's is completely applicable if one chants the holy name of the Lord without offense, for he immediately becomes more than a brahmana. As Sridhar Swami says, Pujatvam, he immediately becomes as respectable as the most learned brahmana and can be allowed to perform Vedic sacrifices. If simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord one becomes sanctified instantly, then what can be said of those persons who see the Supreme Lord face to face and who understand the descent of the Lord, as Devahuti understands Kapila-dev. Usually, initiation depends on the bona fide spiritual master who directs the disciple. If he sees that a disciple has become competent and purified by the process of chanting, he offers the sacred thread to the disciple just so that he will be recognized as 100% equal with a Brahmana. This is also confirmed in the Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sri Sanatana Goswami. As a base metal, like bell metal, can be changed into gold by a chemical process, any person can similarly be changed into a Brahmana by Diksha Vidana, the initiation process. It is sometimes remarked that by chanting, the chanting process, one begins to purify himself and can take birth in his next life in a Brahmana family and then be reformed. But at this present moment, even those who are born in the best Brahmin families are not reformed, nor is there any certainty that they are actually born of Brahmana fathers. Formerly, the Garbhadhana reformatory system was prevalent, but at the present moment, there is no such Garbhadhana or seed-giving ceremony. Under these circumstances, no one knows if a man is factually born of a Brahmana father. Whether one has acquired the qualification of a Brahmin depends on the judgment of a bona fide spiritual master. He bestows upon the disciple the position of a Brahmana by his own judgment. When one is accepted as a Brahmana in the sacred thread ceremony under the Panchatric system, then he is Dvija, twice born. This is confirmed by Sanatana Goswami, Dvijatvam Jayate. By the process of initiation by the spiritual master, a person is accepted as a Brahmana in his purified state of chanting the holy name of the Lord. He then makes further progress to become qualified, a qualified Vaishnava, which means that the Brahminical qualification is already acquired. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and to all the assembled devotees. Vanchakalpadurvascha kripasindabhevacha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Are there any questions? Yes. Oh, is there any air available? There's a lot of air outside. I'm not sure about in here, though. It's very low quality. We need it for our brains to function, as well as other organs. Please go ahead.
So Maharaj, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more or elaborate a little bit more on seeing the Lord face to face. What does that mean, considering that in Mahabharata we read that Duryodhana also was seeing Krishna face to face like that?
First of all, in the Madhurya Kadambini, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the various stages of advancement in devotional service, beginning with Shraddha and ending with Prema. And he describes how at every level there's a diminishment of any obstacles that were created by some kind of offense from previous lives. And even in the bhava stage, and until one sees the Lord face to face, then one, he says, can be assured everything's cleared. And in regard to those who saw Krishna face to face, there's an appreciating capacity amongst those who come to see Krishna face to face. Krishna's available to everyone, but according to their capacity to appreciate him, then he'll be revealed to one degree or another. As we read in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the number of personalities who didn't recognize Krishna are legion. For instance, Pondraka was a devotee of Lord Shiva, but somehow or other he got a benediction from Shiva to pretend that he was Narayan. And his foolish ministers told him, no, you are Narayan. And when he saw Krishna, he told Krishna that well, actually he wrote him a letter and he said, when I meet you, I want you to hand over your disc and your club and all those symbols that actually belong to me. And Kṛṣṇa told the messenger to tell him, yeah, I'll give them to you. Maybe not in the way you expect. And we find that Narakasura and Shalva, Shishupal, all of these personalities had no appreciating capacity for Kṛṣṇa, because they were envious of him. Therefore, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmanyadavritam anakulyena Kṛṣṇanushīlanam bhaktir uttama. So there's a way in which one gradually has to become purified and then come to the point of performing favorable devotional service to the Lord. The more one's attitude towards the Lord is favorable, Kṛṣṇa says, Ye yatha mam prapadyante, tanstathai bhajamyaham, that I reciprocate in kind. And if somebody ignores Kṛṣṇa altogether, as is mentioned in the beginning of the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Parikshit says, are you sure the Lord's partial? It really seems like he favors the demigods. And Shukadeva says, no, actually, he is favorable to everybody. It's just that the demigods have a favorable attitude towards him, so they're able to take advantage of his mercy. Just as much as if you have a class, isn't it, Professor Chuck? And you have a student that's more attentive and open to hearing what you have to say, that they seem to do better. Yes? In the same way, those like Duryodhana, who couldn't appreciate Kṛṣṇa, evidenced by the fact that when Kṛṣṇa said, I'm not going to fight in Kurukshetra, and he gave a choice to both Arjuna and Duryodhana, and he said, you can have all my armies, or you can have me, and I'm not going to fight. And Duryodhana said, I'll take the armies. And when Arjuna was asked, I'll take Kṛṣṇa. So he had a different perspective of Kṛṣṇa, even though they're seeing the same person. Duryodhana thought, well, what good is he? I want the armies. So because of their attitude towards Kṛṣṇa and mistaking him to be an ordinary person, they don't see him in the same way. And so the other evidence is that everybody says, Shukadeva Goswami, even all the demons got benefited in the end because they kept saying, Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa, I hate Kṛṣṇa, I hate Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. Like Shishupal from the very time he was a baby, when he could talk baby talk. How old is that, usually? What's the first babble, the age that a baby can babble? 1 year, then he would, I'm Kṛṣṇa. All the way up to the last second before he was killed by Kṛṣṇa. But he kept saying Kṛṣṇa, 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 and somehow they kept him in touch with Kṛṣṇa. Even Bondraka, who is such a fool that he thought he was Narayan and he believed all his friends. And Shiva gave him some stopgap benediction that he could kind of look like Narayan. And even he got liberation because at least he was thinking of Kṛṣṇa. But Vena, says Shukadeva Goswami, he didn't get anything because somehow or other he artfully avoided Kṛṣṇa, not even blaspheming Kṛṣṇa or thinking of him. And he just said, there is no God, he didn't even say Kṛṣṇa, there is no God, and I'm God, the king's God. Don't you know that? Then the Brahmanas killed him. So it has to do with one's own attitude towards him, that one can take advantage to see him who he take advantage. And that's indicated also in this purport, because Prabhupada does mention that it's the quality of the chanting that counts. I'm right now writing some ideas, thoughts about 4 verses that Prabhupada, not verses, but I'm considering them verses. They're instructions he gave about japa. And on one of them, he says that the holy name is equally beneficial to everyone, 100% the same. It's just a matter of the chanter and whether the chanter is covered by the 10 offenses or not. And once the 10 offenses are cleared, then you get the same access. And similarly in this purport, this mercy of Kṛṣṇa, which is available through Yanama, Deha, Shravanada, Kirtana, hearing, chanting, remembering, so forth, it's dependent, he said, on the quality of the chanting. So Prabhupada even mentioned here, if you chant without offense, then you get the complete benefit. If not, then you do get benefit, but it's indirect or it's diffused and it takes longer. Melanie.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, in that purport, there was a section which mentioned that if you're not born in a Brahmana family, you can start your devotional service, but that's a beginning. But does it mean that one has to again take in a Brahmana family to perfect their chanting? And Sridhar Swami's comment was a little confusing. If you can please elaborate.
No, that's very straightforward. That was the argument of people who are misguided. They say, by chanting Hare Krishna, you start your process, therefore you have the benefit of taking birth in a Brahmana family. And this is the opinion of the smartest. And I've experienced it directly in India. I was with my godbrother living in Jagannath Puri for a while. And we walked we were in front of the Jagannath temple. And one of the Mahants from the temple came up and he said, unless you take birth again in a Brahmin family, you cannot come in the temple. Which is their idea that it's by birth that you're qualified. And what Sridhar Swami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and all the other acharyas concur on is that by the process of chanting Hare Krishna, that's what this verse means, and the next one, then you become qualified because the chanting Hare Krishna destroys not only your previous karmas, as mentioned by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Samrita Sindhu when he describes why it is that devotional service frees you from distress when you first started. Is it because he says that aparada palam papam kutam bijam palon mukham kramenaiva praliyante Vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. Because all your previous sinful reactions to karma are destroyed by the chanting of Hare Krishna. And in his Namashtakam, as you know, better than most people in the world, Rupa Goswami also says that the chanting of Hare Krishna destroys not only those stages of karma that are subtle and developing, but also the prarabdha, which means the present body becomes transformed. You're no longer a dog eater or whatever. There are lots of different designations. Kirata hunandar pulinda pulkasha bhirashumva yavana kasadaya yene chapapa yadapashaya shaya shudyanti tasmai pravishnave namaha. Shukadev Goswami says those are all names of people who are far flung outside any kind of spiritual practice, and he says even those people become purified by the power of Lord Vishnu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirmed in his discussion with Haridas Thakur and Sanatan Goswami that the body of a devotee, even the practitioner, is no longer a material body. Because one who's chanting Hare Krishna, then even their prarabdha becomes transformed. That's the essence of the argument, because there's a way in which if you still have this sinful reaction, then you're not qualified to do these kinds of puja. You have to become a brahmana. But these verses are saying once you chant Hare Krishna and become a Vaishnava, then you're no longer designated in that way, that you have that designation of being a dog eater or anything to do with this material world. And those drishtaisa bhava janitar vapushashta doshar na prakritaf amiha bhaktidanasya pashyat gangam nasang na kalabudbuna payana pankar brahma dravapama bhagachiti niradharmai. Rupa Goswami confirms in the Upadeshamrita that you shouldn't see a Vaishnavi from a materialistic point of view. Whatever body they were born into, they've transcended. So you don't have to take birth again. that's why you'll notice that even if somebody comes from the family of cannibals, fine young cannibals, and chants Hare Krishna, then they become eligible to perform these rituals that are reserved only for brahmanas. And then Prabhupada points out that, and actually Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur started this practice. It was in the time of Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, when somebody became a Vaishnava, they would strip themselves of any designation of the Varnashrama, showing that they're not connected to the Varnashrama. And that includes the Brahmin's thread, because in India, every young boy would get a Vedic initiation from the father at a certain age. And then they wear a thread the rest of their life. Whether they chant on it or not, that's another thing. But it still is prevalent in the culture, and everyone would wear their thread around like, hey, I'm from a Brahmin family, but what's your quality? And have you been actually reformed by just being born into it and receiving an empty mantra from your father who's not following it either? And therefore, those who became Vaishnavas would then take off their thread and say that we have nothing to do with Brahmanism, it's part of the Varnashrama designation. But then when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur began, when he was giving initiation, then he would give the thread back, if those had taken it off or those never had it, to show, and it was obviously more relevant in Indian society than it is in America. They're like, what's with the string, man? There it meant that you've taken Vaishnava initiation, you're already a Brahmin. It's included in that. That was part of the big argument that was going on at the time. They wanted to kill Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They tried to assassinate him because he was teaching that this is not required that you're born in a Brahmin family, and it's a tendency in most religious systems that everyone wants to close ranks and say, like, only these people can do it. And basically Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, that's not supported in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is one of the verses in which it's not supported, that says, you chant under the guidance of a spiritual master, and you're eligible, according to the spiritual master's consideration, to take the Brahminical initiation and perform Vedic sacrifice even. Did I answer your question? Okay, there's many more. You two were first, starting with Brajaras Bhavana.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Are you spiritual scientists in the back coming up with Shastra Sar? Are you spiritual scientists in the back coming up with new pramanams? Okay, that's good. I thought you may be reminding the Shastra. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In the purport, it was mentioned that one becomes immediately qualified to perform Vedic sacrifices after chanting. And this concept of immediately, or these other benedictions that we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam and other books, where someone reaps some benefit, for example, going back to Godhead, seeing the Lord face to face, and so on. There's many different kinds of benedictions that are there. And the premise, or the way you can get those benedictions, they seem quite simple, like whether it's reading a chapter, chanting the holy name, and so on. How can we understand that? Because, of course, at least I don't feel it happening in real time. So when do those become satisfied, and are there other requirements that are unspoken?
Regarding the diminishment of past sinful activities, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions a section from the Shastra that says, when one puts a needle, and this would be relevant to the garland makers in our group, who, by the way, I think are the best in the world. Hare Krishna. That if you take 1,000 lotus petals and you put a needle through them, it appears that it's going through all at once. And in one way, from one perspective, you say, like, the needle went through. It just happened. It was like one thing. But if you were to analyze it a little more carefully, you'd say it went through one at a time. And kramenaiva praliante. There's a way in which the verse I just quoted, aparada palam papam, kutam bijam palon mukam kramenaiva. Krama means step by step. There's a step-by-step understanding of the prarabdha, or the various stages are destroyed from subtle to gross, or you could say they're destroyed from gross and then subtle. Whatever it may be, it happens so rapidly compared to the amount of time we've been here in the material world that it's said it happens simultaneously with the chanting. However, it does depend on the quality of one's chanting. There is a way in which, as the quintessential teaching on this comes from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the story of Ajamila, which Shukadeva Goswami recounts. He had heard it from other sages, and then he recounted it to Parikshit Maharaj, and he tells, of course, you all know the story of Ajamila, who was a dutiful Brahmin, but then he watched YouTube, and he fell down. And the next thing that happened was he found himself again in sinful life. And then, because of his past pious activities, he named his son Narayan, name of God. And he was calling his youngest son. He had children even when he was in his 80s or 90s. And he had just lost it. He let himself go, basically. But he had the holy name because he kept calling his young son, and especially at the time when he was about to leave his body, he panicked, and he called out to his son, Narayan. And it did say in one place that he called several times, and in a lecture, Prabhupada says, who said several times? One time, sufficient. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on this. He gives an extensive commentary which Prabhupada puts at the end of the chapter as additional notes. And it refers to a verse in which Vishwanath gave pages and pages of commentary in which he describes the potency of the holy name. And he says that one may ask how it is that Ajamila, even after he chanted Narayan, because obviously he said it, his son was there, and he kept saying, oh, Narayan, bring me some juice, Narayan, here, eat this, there's this exchange going on with Narayan. And he says that some people then ask, well, how is it that he kept on doing sinful activities and wasn't completely reformed immediately? And Vishwanath Chakravarti answers, he said, it only appeared that he was going on with his sinful life because actually it was like a snake whose teeth had been taken out. And if you see sometimes when you go around Govardhan Hill or any other place, when everyone comes out to beg during the festival times, there's some people, usually kids, and they'll have a basket with a cobra in it. And they'll bring it over to you and go, here, check it out. And they're like, wow, cobra. But those cobras don't have any teeth. And then, so there's a way in which he said, it appeared the snake was biting, it appeared he was still doing sinful activities, but there's a way in which they had no effect on him because he was already indemnified by the process of chanting the holy name of the Lord. That doesn't apply to people who then take advantage of that and say, well, because I'm indemnified, I'll just go on sinning. That's an offense to the holy name. But if one is innocent and chants it the way he did, then that purification is there. And the other point that's extremely important is that and it goes back to the analogy of the lotus flowers, lotus petals being strung, being pierced by a needle, is that it's a process. There's a process of purification. For instance, initiation is described by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur not as an event, but a process. He calls the Pancha Samskar. There's a way in which there's a gradual reformation of the consciousness, starting with tapa, which Bhaktivinoda Thakur says means a deliberate turning away from the material world, a sense that I don't want to participate in the way that I did before. And then Pandra, which means now identify myself as a Vaishnav. Urdhva Pundra, put on tilak and so forth, and neck beads. And then there's the next step, which is that one takes nama, or the name. One makes a vow to chant the name, and then also one takes a new name. And then there's mantra. One takes diksha, or the diksha mantras. And then there's deity worship. These 5 he mentions, pancha samskar. So although we say it's initiation, it's still, the petals are there and it's a process. So it's at once immediate, but also kramenaiva, in steps that it takes place. And just as an aside, the artavad, which is number 5, this comes from, of course, all the offenses come from the Padma Purana. There's one verse in the Padma Purana, it's in a discussion with Narada and one of the 4 Kumaras when they're talking about what's the best way to make advancement in devotional service, and then Narada gives a verse which has the 10 offenses is actually one verse, but then we dissect it and we put it into 10, actually 11. I don't know why you just call it the 11. To be inattentive. Why does that get left out? In any case, Artavad comes from Purva Mimamsa, where there are statements in the Shastra that say, if you perform the Purnahuti, for instance, the last part of a fire yagya, then by the Purnahuti, then all your desires are fulfilled. So then Jaimini says, who's the purveyor of the Purvamimamsa, and then he says, so does that mean all your desires fulfilled for eternity because you did one Purnahuti? He said, no, that's what it means is in that context. Only in this context are all your desires fulfilled. The sankalpa, the goal you made for this yajna is fulfilled when you do the Purnahuti. Not all desires for all time, that's called artavad. He called it artavad. And the Mimamsakas call it artavad, which means that it's an exaggeration. And they apply it to many things. That's artavad, that's how to put it in context. So when we have the 10 offenses, we have number 5 and say, this is not artavad. This is not one of these things where when you say Hare Krishna and then you're purified of all your sinful reactions. It's not an exaggeration. They're saying never in relationship with the Lord, because it's directly Kṛṣṇa, and He'll purify all aspects of one's existence by coming in contact. So what to do with those statements to understand them in the context that I just gave? Does that help? Oh, good. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for the nice class. I was just thinking about just reading the statement in the Nectar of Instruction, where Prabhupada writes in the preface that advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. And then we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explaining what attitude is required in the 3rd verse of Shishtashtaka. Can you please throw some light on how that can actually help us in, or how can we develop that kind of attitude?
How can we develop that kind of attitude? He's referring to the 3rd verse, Trinad api suni chena toror api suhishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari, that one should be very humble. And how do we develop humility? One is to come to grips with who we are and what our existential situation is. The false ego tells me, according to Shukadeva Goswami, Deha patra kalatra desha atmasaini sasatsapi tesham pramata nidhanam pashanapina pashati. There's a kind of illusion that I'm in, that I'm my own man, or nirmana moha jita sangha dosha. Nirmana, this is from Gita. Krishna says nirman, don't be nirman, be nirman. Nir means without, and man means I'm the man. Nirman. And one one could read the Srimad Bhagavatam, for instance, the forest of material enjoyment, and see in the forest of material enjoyment is described the existential situation of the soul who wanders away from Krishna's protection and then becomes lost in the forest. Have you ever been lost in the forest? You ever been lost in a city? Ever been lost anywhere? Without GPS, right? It's very scary. And the whole experience here in the material world is scary, except that I try to claim that everything's fine. So if we can glimpse for a moment our tenuous situation here in the material world, and that we come to realize I don't have any other protector. In fact, I was just reading in the 3rd canto the other day where Prabhupada says, it's really difficult to tell your problems to anybody because most people can't understand the extent of your suffering. And at that very time, I was suffering some mental, what should I say? I was suffering mentally. And so when I read that, I thought, yeah, because I was looking for somebody to tell. I was like, I can't tell that person, he's suffering worse than me. I can't tell this person because they don't care. And I was like, going down the list, you know. And then Prabhupada said, but Kṛṣṇa, he's the Paramatma, he can understand everything about you, and he knows why you're suffering, what it would come to be, and just tell him. So I was chanting japa at the time, and I thought, I'm just going to tell Kṛṣṇa. And give Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And it really helped. Why did I say that? Because we are in a tough situation, and we can become humble by just realizing that we're in a tough situation and nobody can help us but Krishna. Just admit that you need help. That's a kind of humility. Like, I'm helpless. My friend Satyadev Prabhu likes to start his japa. I got in the habit of doing this when traveling with him by, just breathing for a few minutes and realizing that I'm helpless. Just realize that any breath could be my last breath. Nothing's guaranteed. I'm not entitled to anything. This engenders a sense of humility. Okay, yes, Kanka, and then coming to Yashoda. And
also,
now I'm going to give 1 minute answers because we're coming down to the last 5 minutes.
Okay, this is.
And we should put a timer on the screen. Can you do that? Count down from 1 minute. Put a 1 minute timer on.
Also,
okay, go.
Also, Srila Prabhupada said to pray to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda because it makes everything much easier.
Wow, what great advice. I like that way better than my answer. So remember Lord Chaitanya?
And wait, there's one more.
Please.
There's a prayer, please, Lord Nityananda, cool my burning mind with the moon-like rays of your lotus feet.
Thank you very much. That's the real answer, whoever asked it. Okay, time for a couple more at 1 minute each. Yashoda and then Bhakti Tim.
Hare Krishna. May I share a quick reflection here on this verse?
A minute or less.
Sure.
Go for it.
So yes, Manta Siddhi, and we were just talking about this verse and the importance of the holy name, how it is so potent to purify everybody in the world, regardless of what state they are in. Oma Pavitra Pavitro Va Sarvavastham, right? So we have right now an open invite from one of our neighbors who are arranging a 12 hours continuous chanting session of the holy name, but that comes with some strings attached. You should be this, and not this. And also restricting ladies from their monthly biological cycle. And we were just talking like, the holy name is so powerful, it's purifying to on every state of every person. And people just add their own imaginations and try to keep it away from general masses and restrict it to a certain small group of people. But then Bhagavatam here clearly just breaks down all of those artificial strings.
It was Speaker Lord Chaitanya who went out in public and just said, everybody chant. It's available to the masses. Yeah, nice point. Okay, Bhakti Tim.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful verse today. I just have a small, silly story about chanting and being relieved of material miseries. I take the Caltrains, not because of pleasure, only out of convenience. It's not fun or on time, really, but it takes me to my work. So I was at the train station. I was like 10 minutes early. So usually I try to get a round in at the train station, 1 round or 2 rounds. And I was 10 minutes early. And so, as we got closer to the time, I was chanting, and then people start to gather around, and most people are on their phones. And there's no shortage, if you've ever been to a train station, of interesting people. So this particular day, I heard a howling sound. Oh, my hairs stood up on end. Actually, it was really an uncomfortable kind of sound. And I'd looked, I was still doing my japa, and there was a little old lady coming down right next to the train track where you're not supposed to be walking. She was walking there, and she was howling. And I was like, oh no. And so most people are on their phones, and I was chanting japa, and she was making a beeline right towards me. Oh no. Fortunately, I have my japa bag, and as she got right in my face, she saw Lord Nrsimhadev. There's nothing, not my chanting. My chanting is very offensive. But I think she saw Lord Nrsimhadev, and she wanted nothing to do with that. So she went and she attacked the person next to me, and she was like, of course, she's so small. It wasn't like she was hurting him, but it was definitely causing a lot of uncomfort, and it's like, I don't want anything to do with that. So she was chasing the guy around. I'm chanting my japa. I'm watching her. Some guy, he was jumping over the railing to get out away from her, and then she went right by me, and she was the lady like going after that lady, and that lady's running. I'm just going back and forth chanting japa, watching all these people, all this chaos ensuing, and I was like, oh man, I'm so happy I have the holy name, and I don't have to deal with that today. Anyways, that's Hare Kṛṣṇa.
It kind of reminded me of Indra when he made an offense to Vritrasura, or he killed Vritrasura, even though they told him, the Brahmin said, no, it's not going to be a big deal, but it was. He was being chased everywhere, and he had to hide out. But I like your conclusion, and that is that we take shelter of the holy name in all circumstances, even those in which we're find ourselves in danger. We should chant the holy name as our only protection. Apana samsritim goran yanama vivashogranan tata sadyo vimucheta yabhipeti swayambayam. We can become free from all fear by chanting, because Krishna is directly there in his name. So that's a good idea. Prabhupada says we should practice saying Hare Kṛṣṇa. Hare Kṛṣṇa. In many circumstances, devotees, whenever they're in a near accident, they always check themselves. Like, did you say Hare Kṛṣṇa? Did you say Hare Kṛṣṇa? What did you say? I said, whoa. Better say Hare Kṛṣṇa. Thank you, everyone, for joining.